The August sun wasn't just a light. It was a weight on Silas Thorne's shoulders. The horizon of Redemption Valley shimmered in the heat, turning the dirt track into a mirage of dust and regret. Silas adjusted his faded hat, feeling the sweat burn on the scar that ran across his left cheek. A reminder 10 years ago, when the law and he still spoke the same language. He wasn't there for gold, nor for justice. He was there for Elias, the brother he swore to protect, but who now plastered wanted posters on every creaking wooden post in that godforsaken town. The silence and redemption felt like a coffin being closed the moment Silas dismounted from his horse, a bay stallion as exhausted as its owner. He pushed open the saloon's swinging doors. The smell of cheap whiskey and chewing tobacco was almost solid. The atmosphere, conversations died down. The sound of the out-of-tune piano ceased on a single, high-pitched note. The bartender, a bloodshot-eyed man named Otis, was wiping the bar counter with a rag that had seen better days. "We're closed to strangers, outsider," Otis growled without looking up. Silas walked to the counter, the clinking of his spurs echoing like a mournful metronome. He placed a single silver coin on the stained wood. "I'm not a stranger, Otis. I've just been gone too long," Silas said, his voice hoarse as mine gravel. "Where's my brother?" The bartender paled. At the back of the room, 3 men slowly stood up. One of them, a burly fellow in a rattlesnake-skin vest, reached for the handle of his Remington. "Elias Thorne has no brothers," said the man in the vest. "He's just got debts. And you look like the kind of man who inherits the dead man's bills." Silas felt a familiar coldness in his stomach. It wasn't fear. It was the instinct that kept him alive in the border wars. He didn't draw his weapon. "Not yet. I didn't come here to inherit debts, friend," Silas replied calmly, turning to face the trio. "I came to settle them. Now, can you tell me where Elias is hiding, or can we find out if that snakeskin vest of yours protects against lead?" The man smiled, revealing a gold tooth that gleamed maliciously in the lamplight. "He's in the devil's mine, waiting for the execution of the Blackwood gang scent. But you won't get there." The man's trigger snapped. Time seemed to slow down. Silas didn't wait for the Remington's hammer to finish its stroke. In a movement that defied physics and the human eye, his right hand descended to the worn holster. There was no hesitation, only the dry, metallic sound of metal sliding against leather. Silas's shot wasn't meant to kill. The lead bullet struck the cylinder of the man in the snakeskin vest's gun the exact moment he pulled the trigger. The impact ripped the gun from the man's hand, throwing it against the wooden wall as he screamed, clutching his numb, bloody fingers. Before the other 2 could even touch their pistols, Silas already had the smoking barrel of his Colt .45 pointed at the nose of the man with the gold tooth. "The next one will be between your eyes, and the gold from your tooth will be the only thing of value left in your coffin," Silas hissed, his voice now as cold as mountain ice. The saloon was in absolute silence, except for the muffled groans of the wounded man. The other 2 accomplices raised their hands, palms open, faces pale as paper under the sweat. "Speak," Silas ordered. "What do the Blackwoods want with Elias? Is he one of them, or a prisoner?" The man with the gold tooth swallowed hard, the barrel of Silas's gun pressing against his skin. He stole the map of the original silver vein that the Blackwoods swear belongs to them. They took it last night. They're at the Devil's Mine, waiting for the boss, Julian Blackwood, to arrive to make him talk before they hang him. Silas felt a tightness in his chest. Julian Blackwood. The name was like an open scar. They had a history that involved more than just silver. It involved the blood of the Thorne family. "How much time do I have?" "Julian arrives at sunset," the man stammered. "If you go now, you might find his body still warm." Silas holstered his weapon with a fluid movement, retrieved his silver coin from the counter, and glanced at Otis, the bartender. "Keep their whiskey on the house. Otis, they'll need it for the pain." He walked out through the double doors. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky a bloody orange, as if the firmament itself were foreshadowing what was to come. Silas mounted his bay horse. He knew the Devil's Mine was a labyrinth of unstable tunnels and darkness, a place where many men had entered and few had emerged with their sanity intact. He rode out of the city. Dust rose behind him like a ghost. On the way, he opened his saddlebag and checked his supplies. A Colt .45 with full ammunition, a hunting knife strapped to his boot .2 sticks of dynamite with short fuses. As the silhouette of the mountain where the mine was located appeared on the horizon, Silas saw something that made his blood run cold, a smoke signal rising from the hills. The Blackwoods knew he was coming. Approaching the mine entrance, Silas found Elias's horse tied to a dry tree. The animal was exhausted, its flanks covered in white foam. Nearby, a Blackwood lookout stood with his back turned, watching the main trail. Silas had two choices now: enter through the front, where confrontation would be inevitable and noisy, or attempt a secondary entrance through the ventilation shafts, which would require silence and nerves of steel, but could give him the element of surprise. Silas Thorne wasn't a man to gamble his life on a stroke of luck, when he could use the shadows to his advantage. He left his bay horse hidden among a cluster of rocks 200 meters from the entrance, and followed on foot, moving with the lightness of a predator. He found what he was looking for: a rotting wooden structure that served as a ventilation shaft, half hidden by dry bushes on the hillside. The air rising from it smelled of damp earth, old gunpowder, and something more metallic: the smell of fear. Silas removed the rusty iron grate with as little noise as possible and slid into the narrow tunnel. The silence inside was absolute, broken only by the rhythmic dripping of water somewhere in the depths. He crawled forward, his fingers finding support on support beams that creaked under his weight. After a 10-minute claustrophobic descent, he reached an opening leading to an upper gallery above the mine's main hall. Below him, an improvised campfire illuminated the center of the cave. The victim, Elias, was tied to a central support beam, his face swollen and his shirt torn. He looked exhausted, but his eyes still gleamed with a thorn's stubbornness. The guards, 3 Blackwood men, played cards on a crate of dynamite, empty, Silas hoped, while a 4th guarded the main entrance. "Tell me where the vein marking is, Elias," growled one of the men, a thin fellow with a burn scar on his neck. "Julian isn't as patient as we are. When he arrives, he won't use words. He'll use the knife." Elias spat blood on the ground. "Tell Julian he can look in hell. That's where I'm taking the secret." Silas, positioned on the wooden walkway above them, felt the trigger of his Colt urge action, but he knew that if he fired now, the guard at the entrance would seal off their exit, and the other 3 could use Elias as a human shield. He looked around and saw an old cargo crane, still with a counterweight of stones suspended by a frayed rope, directly above 2 of the guards. At that moment, the sound of horses' hooves echoed outside. The rhythm was heavy and authoritative. "He's here," said the scar guard, rising and adjusting his hat. "Julian's here." Silas knew the time for stealth was over. Julian Blackwood wouldn't go in alone. He would bring reinforcements. Silas needed to clear the hall and free Elias within the next 60 seconds, or they would both die in that hole. Silas's instincts prevailed. He couldn't risk a misfire with Elias's life on the line. He opted for chaos. With a swift, silent movement, he cut the crane's thick rope with his hunting knife. The stone counterweight plummeted with a deafening crash, crushing 2 of the guards before they could even comprehend what was happening. The 3rd guard, the one with the scar, jumped aside, screaming in surprise. Taking advantage of the panic and the rising dust, Silas leaped from the walkway, landing on the dirt floor with the agility of feline. He rolled and stood up, the Colt .45 already in his hand. "Silas!" Elias shouted, his eyes wide with shock and relief. "Stay quiet, brother," Silas said, his voice low and focused. He pointed the gun at the scar guard, who was desperately trying to draw his own weapon. Silas's shot was accurate, hitting the guard's shoulder and disarming him. The man fell to the ground, screaming in pain. Silas ran to Elias and cut the ropes that bound him with his knife. "Can we leave now?" Elias asked, weak and trembling. "Not yet. Julian is outside," Silas replied. He helped Elias to his feet and limped toward the mine entrance. The dust was beginning to settle, and the light of the setting sun was fading on the horizon. Silas could hear the Blackwoods' voices shouting outside. "We have to be quick," Silas said. He grabbed one of the bananas from the dipping bowl. He took the dynamite he had hidden in his saddlebag and lit the fuse. "Behind me, Elias!" Silas shouted. He threw the dynamite toward the mine entrance, where Julian and his men were about to enter. The explosion shook the entire mine, knocking down rocks and blocking the entrance. Silas and Elias managed to escape through a secondary exit, a crack in the rocks that Silas had noticed earlier. They mounted their horses and rode away from the devil's mine, the sound of screams and the explosion echoing behind them. They rode until nightfall, until they were safe in a small camp hidden in the hills. Elias was wounded, but alive. "Thank you, Silas," said Elias, his face illuminated by the lighted campfire. "I don't know what I would have done without you. You are my brother, Elias." "I will never leave you behind," replied Silas, his voice full of emotion. He knew the Blackwood gang was still out there, and that they wouldn't give up searching for the map. But for now, they were safe, and that was all that mattered.